Welcome to Love What You Love. I'm Julie Rose. I'm insatiably curious about people and the world around us, and absolutely in love with passion and unself-conscious enthusiasm. Every other week, I geek out with someone about the thing that they love, and then I share it with you. Hello! How's everyone adjusting to the every other week Love What You Love schedule? If you're jonesing for your joy fix in between new episodes, I'm posting links to the back catalog of episodes on Twitter and Instagram. Last week, I linked to episode 1, which was Plein Air Painting with Michael Chamberlain, and episode 10, Fragrances with Imitsu G's. So definitely follow the show on our socials so you can get happy in your ear holes anytime you want. Okay, let's meet this week's guest. Jessie McLaughlin has had a lifelong interest in interior design and the energy of spaces. The owner of Jessie Lane Interiors, a residential and commercial interior design firm. Her work has been featured in Elle Decor and People magazine, and she is absolutely passionate about storytelling and soul. We had such a good chat about changing the energy in a room, how to survive the pandemic in your space, taking small steps, playing to your strengths, embracing your passion, and so much more. So find out why Jessie loves interior design, and why you might learn to love it too. Hello, Jessie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Julie. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
I'm so excited to talk with you because interior design is something that's so fascinating to me and something I also don't get. So
I love that.
So I'd love to understand, maybe just first for the audience, can you define what interior design actually means?
I'm sure there's a vast array of opinions about that. But I think, any interior that we're in, whether you thought about it or not, there is some energy in the space. There is design, even if it's accidental. So, I guess I would say interior design is hopefully a more intentional look at how the furnishings, the architecture, the fabrics, the finishes, the lighting, how all those things in a room come together to make a space.
When you talk about the energy of a room, what do you mean by that?
It's funny. It's especially being from the South and then moving, to Los Angeles. I'm sure lots of people from the South might roll their eyes at that word, but it's just so true. I think, in fact, we even use it in therapy. In the therapy that I've been in a lot, we talk about energy and almost like that thing that you can't even always put your finger on. And yet there's one quote that I love that is, energy doesn't lie. And so I think it's mostly just the feeling you get when you walk into a room. And one thing, as a 40-year-old woman, I am actually learning now to trust my feelings more, to figure out, first of all, that I have a gut response, and that often that gut response is actually wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do I learn to not only recognize that response, feel that response, but then also listen to it? All of that to say, what are we talking about again? Interior design is, for me, a lot of it is about gut feelings. And I know that is not the best way to go about it. But for me, it's the only way that works. Because I think often when you get too much in your head about a space, it can lose the creativity that you really want to have, that makes a space feel lively and fun and joyful.
how do you go about, and this is probably just a really kind of amorphous question, but like, how do you go about designing a room? Like, what's the nitty gritty of designing a room? And then how do you kind of decide on, like, do you decide the energy ahead of time, or is it something that just kind of emerges from it organically?
That's a great question. For me, I usually start with an anchor piece. So, it might be, for a client, it might be that there's a family heirloom that they really want to incorporate, or it might be that there's an architectural element in a room that you want to kind of highlight. So that's how I like to, everybody's process is different, and that's so true of so many things. I think, there's some people who probably have a very formulaic way that they approach interior design, or any kind of design, actually. And I don't, but I do usually want to start with an anchor piece. It might be a couch, like, that you have always dreamed of having an emerald velvet couch, and you finally have saved up and you are going to design, have even a custom emerald velvet couch made. Okay, well, I love that, because that's our starting point. So then what are we going to do? How is the rest of the room going to complement and bring out the elements of that emerald velvet couch? You have to, from there, we'll say, okay, well, another big anchor piece. I think if you had just a completely white room, white walls, flat ceiling, I might say to start with a rug, because the rug literally anchors the room. And so it's a great kind of jumping off point for the rest of the room. And some pieces, are harder to find things for. So if you have a piece that is a funky color and that's your anchor piece, okay, well, then, finding the rug to match that chartreuse armchair might be a little more challenging, but at least, you're starting with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you have your own design business. When did you get started with all this? Like, what prompted you? Was there something that happened, like, were you like rearranging your teenage bedroom? Like, where did you get started with design?
It's my mom's fault, for sure. She has always been a huge lover, not only a lover of design, but a designer herself. When I was growing up, she had different creative endeavors. One was a bow business, like BOW. That was when big bows were super in for little girls in the early 90s. And she had a bow business named Bodacious. Amazing. And so she did that for a while. It was really successful, but then, just decided she did not want to do that any longer. But she was always, my dad is a dentist, and she was always going in and making his dental offices beautiful. And then, as I grew up and I needed less from her, she really started moving into that even more, where she created an event space. She would have vacation rental homes that she would like Airbnb that were designed beautifully. And so I grew up like going to antique shops with her, or watching as she made custom furniture, came up with custom furniture for our house, but I grew up just being around that. And, I remember when I was 13, I begged her to let me redo my bedroom. And so we went through the process together. She let me pick out a fabric for my bedspread, and we had the bedspread made. And it's funny because it was this Moroccan star motif that I would still use to this day. I still actually just did a project with Moroccan stars So funny how those things,
Yeah.
that love is
Yeah.
still there. You know, it's funny now we call each other and she tells me about the project she's got going on and I tell her about my projects. And it's been so much fun just to continue bonding with her that way. I did not, you know, it's definitely something that is self-taught. My degree was in music. I was a voice major and then communication studies. Looking back, of course, I wish I had, you know, the technical training, but I think there's so much support for that now. Like, you know, there's so much of that you can farm out, that I think it is more about the love and, kind of being able to, like we said, imagine what something can be. I think that's one of the other things I love about design is like the way that rooms can transform and what it can do for the people who use those rooms, what it can do for your spirits, for, you know, it allows people to really be able to see what the possibilities are.
What's the difference in someone's energy or psychology when they have a room designed for them?
It's so interesting how we continue to learn about ourselves as we age and mature. Maybe that's a better word.
Yes, mature.
And I just, you know, I have learned recently so much about ADHD and how people with ADHD work and, you know, coming to terms with the fact that I have it and what does that mean? And one thing that I've learned is that visually what's happening around people who have ADHD in the space around them it has a huge impact on them. You know, and so that's kind of been helpful for me because I realize I feel like I'm so affected by my environment. When my environment is orderly and clean and there's just you know, it feels energetically peaceful. I feel like I can accomplish more. And, you know, in some ways that's just kind of a very basic level of this. But I think, you know, there's all kinds of science on what color does to us, how we're affected by color. Yeah. So I think even, and this year, of course, with COVID and everybody being home so much, you know, I don't think we realized how important our space at home was until we were kind of forced to be there all the time. And so it takes on a whole different meaning and just importance when we're at home all day, every day, which is, you know, what my family is doing right now.
People in general, like they've been stuck at home for so long. What's something they could do in their environment to not shake things up, but maybe shift the energy or brighten things up? Like from an interior design perspective, you know, what would you recommend for people to help them get through however much longer we have of this pandemic?
I mean, I know for me, you know, this is so basic, but, you know, as I am talking to you right now, I'm staring at my unmade bed. And I know that when I do the smallest thing, like whether it's make my bed or whether it's deal with the little stack of junk that continues to pile up in the corner, you know, that stack of mail that you are just keep avoiding. Which I know this doesn't seem like an interior design answer, but, you know, I just feel like there's so much we can do with just to bring joy into our life in little ways. And the one thing, you know, I feel super, super grateful and privileged that I'm able to do some of these things like, you know, create custom furniture or get, you know, a beautiful rug, an old antique rug for a space. But the thing that I worry about is people feeling like if they can't do that, then they can't have a home, a beautiful home that they're feeling relaxed and happy in, you know, because a rug I had that my mom found for me, it was a rug that she got from a store. They had like a section of seconds. So, rugs that were kind of in the process of being made had some mistakes in them. And so they were super discounted, but it was a beautiful rug. And she got it for me for my college apartment. And I drug that rug across the country. Like for years and years and years, I had that rug. And it wasn't an expensive rug. It wasn't, but it brought me so much joy. It had purple in it, which I was big on the purple front at that point. All of that to say, it does not matter how much money something is. It's like me making my bed is something I can do for free that changes my whole outlook. And, sometimes I don't even have, I don't have the emotional energy to do that. Yeah. But often when we do one small thing, there's a ripple effect for me anyway, And so I think, do that one small thing, clean up that one little area that's making you crazy. And then you might see that, there actually is room for that piece of furniture on clearance at Target that you've been looking at. Or that bright pillow is going to look so much happier on your couch if, the coffee table gets organized. These are the psychological tricks I have to use for myself. Because right now I think it's just hard. And that is what, I keep talking about just in my own personal therapy and with my kids, and have to remind myself of that this is a really challenging and unusual time in the world. And so whatever small things we can do where we give ourselves lots and lots and lots of grace. But the thing that we do actually contributes to like nourishing our soul at the same time. So for me, that's doing these small things, cleaning the kitchen, like cleaning the kitchen and then watering my plants and moving a few things around. One thing I think that I love to do, not only in my house, but in clients' houses, is just to move things from one room to another room, switch it up, because often something that, feels kind of lifeless in one room, when you move it, it can bring totally new life. If it's something, like a coffee table that you move to a bedroom and use it in a different way, often it can just kind of update the energy in a room.
Is it about the associations with the pieces, like the history, or is it more like, do the shapes of these things, do they affect kind of the energy of the room? And if you move them to a different place or a different angle, it changes that energy.
Absolutely. It's funny. I have a chest in my front entrance that I go back and forth on because it's this really old piece that was handed down to me from my parents. And I love it because of that. But sometimes I think, is it too heavy? Does it feel, too old here? Like, does it not feel modern enough? And so I was just switching out lamps on it yesterday, in fact. And one lamp that I love and was hoping would work, the scale just wasn't right. But I do think it's so easy, especially in spaces that we're in all of the time, to just kind of get in this rut. Mm-hmm. And so just changing things up a little bit. Often, to people's houses, like they've gotten into a habit of seeing a room in a certain way, which we can do in relationships, we can do in so many things.
Yeah.
It's a great metaphor for other parts of our life as well, a job, anything. Sometimes it just takes somebody coming in who has never stepped in that room before to say, hey, like, why is this here? Why is this big piece of furniture kind of blocking the light from the bottom half of this window? Or why is, things that are so small, but we all do it. when we are just constantly in a space, or it's the things that we are familiar with. And they often, and sometimes it's beautiful things, a beautiful piece of art that somebody didn't hang up and just that has sat, behind it in the back of a closet for years. Or, a beautiful blanket that their grandmother knitted or crocheted that they just have thrown up in a cabinet. They don't see the beauty in it anymore. So one thing that's really important to me is like people feeling like they can make their space beautiful and happy and peaceful without having to spend a lot of money. And it's great and fun when somebody can spend the money, but I think, it should be for everyone. And there's little things that we can all do to achieve that feeling that we're looking for.
So when you're working with a client, you say you kind of start with a piece,
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of decide on the aesthetic? Is it kind of a combination of you and the client, or the client just says, hey, go for it? And, how does that work? Is it an iterative process?
Yes. And, it's so interesting because you would love to be able to say, and I think the longer I do this, the more I'm able to say, like, this is how I work best. But every client is different. And so you have to be able to be flexible because people are people. And, often you will say somebody will love a piece, but then they'll see another piece and they'll want to change. And, that's all. It's kind of like constantly walking a tightrope. Obviously, the most fun projects are when people say, I trust you.
Yeah.
Those are your dream projects.
Yeah.
But they're going to be the ones living in the space. And so, you have to honor that. And I think what's really great is when you and the client work together and you come up, the synergy creates a really, really beautiful space. When you have the same vision, I love clients who are willing to kind of push the envelope a little bit.
What does that mean to you? What do you mean by push the envelope?
For me, when you are constantly kind of swimming in the design world, you get you see some things again and again and again. And it doesn't mean that the thing is not good. It's just that your eyes get kind of tired of seeing it. And it's something that, is a fine line because most clients are not constantly looking at images of spaces. And so they may love that thing that you've seen 1,000 times and they're just so sick of.
Right.
So that's what I love is the client who also wants to have a room that feels very, very unique. Every room is unique. I mean, let's be honest. They're really, unless it's a hotel, every room is different. What the person brings to it is different. But I think I really value a mix of old things that bring history and soul to a room, but then, some modern pieces with it that help it feel fresh and new and young. So yeah, client who is willing to say, yeah, let's do something that maybe we haven't seen 100 times. Let's be real. Everything has been done before.
Right.
But it's fun to kind of play, to push the boundaries. And I think that's why I love doing custom pieces so much, because they can be customized to the room, to the client. And often, I will see something that I love, but I'm in the back of my head, I'm thinking, yeah, but I would like it more if I could change this, this and this. That might be a personality problem. But yeah, so that is fun. I think design should be fun. Like there are enough serious things in the world. And, there are always issues with production or with making sure everything gets there in time. And, there's, of course, technical aspects, you measuring, 500 times to make sure you got it right. But if design is stressful, it's like, I don't feel like it's worth it. I mean, it's fabrics and furniture. And I think it definitely has this huge effect on people, but let's make it joyful while we're doing it.
If someone said, Jessie, just make this room beautiful for me, how would you describe your aesthetic?
It's funny. There's a lot of what is super, I think, popular right now is a lot of all white and natural woods and, kind of a farmhouse look, which is beautiful. And it's not really me. Mm-hmm. And I've had to, and I have elements of that, I think, when in my kitchen, I for sure have elements of that. But I realized like I really enjoy color. And I think, you have to be careful with color because it's easy. Some colors especially can quickly move into like, I don't know, clown territory. So be careful. But I love rooms that give me energy when I walk into the room and that take me somewhere. I think I have a very eclectic style because I really love a little bit of everything. I think part of that is my rebellious nature. Like I do not want to say that I'm one style. So, I feel like every room needs something vintage or antique because it helps ground a space. I love a collected look, a space where you don't have a chair, a sofa, and a love seat that, all match that looks like you walked into a store and you just pointed to a room and they put that room in your house. Which is not, if some people love that. And that's for me, I really want, the pieces to look like they came from different eras often, like different, they're telling a story. It's used so much, this whole idea of rooms telling a story. But I think the reason it's used so much is because it's so true. And that is when we were coming up with, what I wanted my tagline for my business to be. We landed on soulful spaces for your story. And that is, I think, the essence of the kinds of rooms I want to create for people, and even in hospitality situations, rooms that have soul, and some people love like a super contemporary look where everything is new and very modern. And that is not me. Like, because I want there to be a story. I want you to kind of feel like you're transported in some way when you walk into a room that I've designed. But, I also want it to feel comfortable and warm and welcoming. And like you can sit down on the couch and even put your feet up on the couch, put your shoes on. I mean, I have 2 boys and a dog, like there has to happen. But, I think warmth and soul and pushing the boundaries, which I like to do that a lot with color. So yeah.
What is like your dream project? And is it a public space? Is it a private space?
It is. And in fact, it's so funny that you asked this. I think a dream project for me would be a hotel. I actually have a friend, one of my dearest friends right now, who has bought this hotel from the 1800s and restoring it out in Arkansas. And she and I were just talking, and we're going to work together. I think she's going to let me do a room or 2. So we're really excited. But I think to do something like that, in Los Angeles would be a dream. Yeah, I think one thing about commercial spaces that is really fun is that in certain cases, like a hotel, or a restaurant, the integrity of the design really holds up because people aren't living in it in the same way that you live in a home, which, of course is the way it goes. But there's something really fun about being able to say, we want to put these vases right here and they are going to stay here forever.
Don't touch it.
Right. That nobody's going to be throwing their book bag or their shoes on top. There's something really cool about that. And I think the other thing with some commercial spaces is that people are willing to take more risks because they're not living in the space. And the idea of taking risks in design is just really fun to me. So, and that's one thing I'm also seeing with clients. It's like, and if you're somebody who is looking for an interior designer, this is a good thing to think about because there's all kinds of styles I could do. Will it be fun? Will it be the thing that, I really want to be doing? Well, no. And so I think the best partnerships are when you find a designer who really shares your vision for the space, not just who can do it. I think most designers can do different styles, and know enough about the different styles that they could pull it off. But which one do they love? That's where really cool things happen.
I'm really curious too about, you talk about rooms telling a story that totally makes sense, in a private home. When you're talking about like designing a hotel room, what's the story and like what's the intersection with the guest? How does that work?
Yeah, I love that. We stayed in an Airbnb recently. Rhett is my husband. I turned 40 recently, and could not have the big 40th birthday party of my dreams that I had planned. But he got a cool Airbnb in Joshua Tree, and it was the most beautiful Airbnb I've ever stayed in. And it was because the design elements were just executed impeccably. And, it's so interesting because it's not even necessarily how I would design a space, but it was just done so well, so collected. And I think the story that was wanting people to feel when they came into that Airbnb was, kind of this relaxing desert hideaway. The textures were amazing. The collectibles, the pieces that you would not find anywhere else. Clearly this was somebody who was great at hunting and finding really cool pieces. And so that was the story. It's like you're staying in this place that kind of has all this history, whether it's this super funky lamp from the 60s or this handmade pottery, like you're staying in a place that is close to nature and is just you're connected to the area, and one thing I saw as I was looking at some of the info you sent me, I love how you were careful to like say that which native lands you were on. And, I think that's something that we can be incorporating more, like honoring the land that we're on.
So you've been doing this since as long as you can remember. What was the moment when you went, oh my God, I freaking love this? Was there a moment of flash like, oh, I love this?
It's so funny because when I look back, I kept having that moment again and again. But I don't know why I didn't realize until a few years ago that I wanted to do this professionally. Like it took a long time.
Yeah.
To actually, and I don't think it's always great to make your passion your profession. Like I think sometimes it drains people of their love for the thing. But I realized that all of my free time, there were how many years? I guess like 9 or 10 years where I homeschooled. I was a stay-at-home mom when my kids were little, and then homeschooled, which I look back on and have lots of feelings about that for another podcast. But so it took me a really long time to actually kind of figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And I thought at the time, I think when I decided that I would homeschool, having kids, being from the South in a very conservative evangelical community, I thought that those things were going to be kind of what I wanted to do with my life, like being a mother, being a homeschool mom. And so, I didn't kind of look beyond that, which I'm still working through a lot of that. Like, why didn't I? Why was that enough? Not that that's not enough too. That's the other thing. Question is, did I really feel like I had given myself true choice in that? Anyway, when I look back and was really trying to figure out, what I wanted to do with my life, like this was a passion that even when I was homeschooling my kids, even when I was moving from into my first college dorm room, I have such a funny story about that, because a lot in the dorm I was in, a lot of the rooms had kind of been redone. And the room that I was assigned was like the top of the top floor. And I guess they just hadn't gotten to it. Still was like really bad, like had nothing had been done to it. And so my mom went to the people, whoever ran the dorm, I can't remember, was like, hey, can we paint since, her room was not redone? And they said, I guess so. Like, I think they were going to redo that room the next year. And so she painted that room purple. We put this crazy leopard fabric kind of on the wall. It was like this amazing dorm room. And that was always the story. Like every new space I went to, my favorite thing about it was getting to make that space my own. Whether it was my first apartment, or whether it was, right after I got married young, and our first apartment, that brought me so much joy. And it was the thing that I would find myself thinking about when, always kind of having to pull myself away from thinking about my surroundings to do the things that I had to do.
So it was a process of figuring out who you were and then giving yourself permission to be that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We all, we're all in that process all the time. So what part of the process of design or working with a client do you absolutely hate?
It's so interesting. And I've seen this, again, this kind of dovetails nicely with the whole ADHD thing, is that the administrative part is really challenging. And, I think we spend so much of our lives beating ourselves up for the things that maybe aren't our strong suits.
Yeah.
Instead of just figuring out kind of ways around that and praising ourselves for the things that are our strong suits. So, it was really a big moment for me when I hired Lindsay, who is my administrative. She's a design assistant, but she handles the administrative things. And that has really allowed my business to grow so much. And, I told her from the beginning, and she knows me well. We had knew each other for years before she started working for me in that capacity. And so she knew that my love, the thing that I'm good at, the reason I want to do this is the creative part of it. And the administrative part is a burden. And she is great at administrative things and is also great at not making me feel bad about not being good, which, I love. And so I think what I've what I've decided is, I think the more that we can do that, the more that we can find little ways to spend more time on the things that we're good at and stop beating ourselves up over the things that are more challenging for us, the better. It's like, what am I trying to prove? I think that has been so big. I think another thing that is hard that I'm getting better at is like realizing when it's just not a good fit, and that is something I've had to do more of. And I think it's always better for both parties to, I don't want somebody to waste their time, and I don't want them to waste my time. So I think as I learn more and more to trust my gut, that, I'm more comfortable saying, hey, this is not a great fit for either one of us. And I think anybody who, has a service where you work with clients, that is something that more and more you have to learn how to do. So that's hard. I think another thing for any interior designer that I talk to, pricing is always challenging. And I think it's just one of those things that the more I do it, the more I learn. And again, this is as a woman that we typically undervalue our time. And so that is something that I'm learning.
So what has been the most surprising thing for you? Maybe in terms of a project or how you approach design or, where you are now. What's been the most surprising thing for you?
This is something Lindsay and I always laugh about, even though we both, it's kind of that nervous laughter and that knowing laughter is just that things always take longer. It does not matter how prepared you are. It does not matter how much you plan. It does not matter. It's like being a designer in a lot of ways is like being a producer, because you're bringing together all these individual parts. If you're having something made, you have to get all these different fabricators, the wrought iron person, the upholsterer, the shower door person, the, marble person for the sink, the wallpaper installer. So it's all these different parts, and that's complicated. And so I think, it is the creative part. Yes, I love so much, and that's why I'm doing it. You also have to become comfortable with, the technical part, because that ends up being a lot of it. And the timing, I think timing is huge. That's been something with COVID that has been hard, because everybody is wanting to do home projects right now, which is great. But the lead time on furniture, on, everything is taking longer. So yeah, I think that is probably just the amount of time that things take is probably the thing that in the beginning was more surprising to me and is now just par for the course.
So has design or starting your own business, has it branched off into other interests that you didn't expect?
That's a good question. I mean, I do think, I launched a little pillow line this past year, and that was something that was kind of a last minute decision, really. But, I had created this sofa that I'm really proud of because it was kind of felt need. I wanted a sofa that would turn into a beautiful guest bed for my office, and it would look like an actual guest bed and not just like a pull-out sofa. And there wasn't one on the market. And so I made the sofa, and I love it. And, it is, I'm selling them now, but, it is expensive for a lot of people. I get it, and for me, it would be as well, and so that was something that I'm learning so much about production and why buying things from small businesses, things that are handmade, things that are made locally, they're always going to be more. While I knew that, I don't think I had a true appreciation for it until I started getting into manufacturing myself, realizing that yes, it is very different when Target, manufactures however many hundreds of thousands of a product. And when I make one, did have a huge appreciation for that. I think I have another level of appreciation for it being on the other side of that now. So after making that couch, I really wanted to make something that, wouldn't be so cost prohibitive for people, but a way to bring fun and little luxury into their homes, but more affordably. And so I decided to come up with this pillow line. Yes, there's still, I think what anybody would consider a nicer, more luxury pillow, because I wanted them to be made well, wanted them to be made with the elements that kind of set apart a typical pillow from a pillow that's going to last and that's going to continue to look good for a long time and that's going to be special. So I've learned so much about the production process doing that, and also just why small businesses have to charge more for their products.
I think we started off with me saying, people can be intimidated by interior design. Mm-hmm. And when I say people, I usually just mean me. So what would you say to people who are interested in getting started but overwhelmed? And we touched on this a little bit, but what's one thing that they could do or one piece of advice you would want to leave everybody with?
The best place to start is just kind of figuring out what you like. And I think so many people, it's I totally understand why it would feel overwhelming because there's so much out there, but people do have a style, even if they don't realize it.
Okay.
And, I think because really it doesn't matter what's popular, what's trendy, whatever, you're living in this house. What is going to make you feel good? What do you want to be surrounded with? And so one thing I will sometimes ask my clients to do, grab a home decor magazine and just rip out your top 5 pages out of that magazine. And what is it about those rooms that you love? Is it the color? Is it, that they have more antiques? Is it that it seems peaceful? Is it that it gives you, a happy energy? What are the things about those rooms that you love? And what are those adjectives? What do you want to feel when you walk into a room in your home? Because ultimately that is what the pieces of furniture, what the finishes, what all of that, the point, the thing that you're trying to achieve with that is the feeling. Another thing that you can do is just go on Pinterest. I get nervous about telling people who have no idea what they like to go on Pinterest because it can be overwhelming. But the great thing is, if you find those 1 or 2 pins that you absolutely love, they'll say, here are more pins like this. And so then you kind of, from there, can kind of begin to really identify what your personal style is.
Well, Jessie, this has been such a pleasure. I'm really grateful for you taking the time to chat and share your wisdom, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for asking me. It's an honor. I told you when you mentioned it, I was like, well, I don't do this much. I hate hearing my own voice, which I know probably most people it's hard for most people, but I appreciate you giving me a chance to kind of push myself in this way. So thanks so much.
You can find Jessie on Instagram at Jessie Lane Interiors and on Twitter at Los Famulous. I'll include those links and links to our website in the show notes. I've also included links to Jessie's favorite nonprofits and links to my favorites as well. Just a reminder that you can find this podcast on Instagram at LoveWhatYouLovePod, on Twitter at WhatYouLovePod, and the website is lovewhatYouLovePod.com. Zeke Rodriguez-Thomas at Mindjam Media provided amazing editing assistance. You can find Zeke at mindjammedia.com. Also, all of the transcripts for Love What You Love are available to everyone on the website thanks to Emily White. Congratulations to Emily on the launch of her new business, The Wordary. If you need transcripts, reach out to her at emily@thewordary.com, and that's TheWordary.com. The music for Love What You Love is called Inspiring Hope by Pink Sounds. A link to that artist is included in the show notes. As always, thank you so much for listening. Let's hang out again soon.
There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.